Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you're here this evening as basically your pregame show for the Celtics and Warriors NBA Finals Game 3 back in the Garden, back in Boston, as the Celtics and Warriors are tied at 1. So we'll definitely get into that here, and we'll kind of dispense with a lot of the pleasantries this evening because I want to try to get you out before game time here. So it'll be a little bit of a shorter podcast, but nonetheless, we'll still try to cram everything in here as well. So without further ado, we'll get to the segment to be sponsored later, the out of the box segment. As you just heard, the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors are tied at 1 apiece going into game 3. As you mentioned, the series shifting to Boston for games 3 and 4 tonight and Friday night. So the Celtics, who ended up doing their job, splitting the series, took game 1 in grand fashion as they came down from, I believe it was 13 points, and had a 40-point fourth quarter, outscoring the Warriors 40 to 16. It was just a bloodbath. And then the Warriors turned the tables on the Celtics in the fourth quarter, as the third and the fourth quarter, and just ended up taking the Celtics out to the woodshed. And that's how we are where we are today as far as going into game 3. Now, as far as any Celtics news, Robert Williams is expected to play tonight, is Ime Udoka in his pregame press conference about like 30 minutes ago said that he was going to play. So he will be available for tonight's game. Now, as far as how much he's going to play, that'll be kind of up in the air because it sounds as though the leash is going to be short. So we'll see how long that goes for Robert Williams, as I would expect probably Grant Williams to probably get his minutes if he can't go more than probably a couple, then maybe a series or so or something out there on the court. We'll see how long he goes, but he will be out. He will be in to start, I should say. So that's the majority of the actual news when it comes to the Celtics. There have been a few things here that have kind of come up, but as far as the Celtics are concerned, as we mentioned, they are going into game 3. Sorry, just had to look at my internet because things have been going on. So I do apologize if things have be a little wonky for you, as of course, Spectrum in all their glory when I'm trying to do my podcast is doing maintenance. So I do apologize if you've run into a little bit of lag here. So sorry, that's what I was looking at. That's why I kind of get distracted there for a second. But we'll plow on through. So other news of the other tenants of the Garden, the Boston Bruins have said goodbye to Bruce Cassidy as he has been officially let go, fired, whatever your choice of words are. I prefer fired. So Bruce Cassidy has been fired as the head coach of the Boston Bruins after taking over for Claude Julien. And that was actually back in 2000. Well, his first season was 2017. 2017. Because I distinctly remember going down to the Patriots parade after they came back from 28-3 on the Falcons. I was taking the train down to Boston to go to the parade, and I remember listening to sports radio, to WEEI at the time, and I remember they ended up saying that Bruce Cassidy ended up getting fired on the day of the parade. That Claude Julien had been let go on the day of the Patriots parade, and of course they did it right in the middle of one of the best parades there ever has been for the greatest Super Bowl of all time. Come at me if you have any better, but I doubt you do. So the Boston Bruins are going to be in the search for a new head coach. As I wasn't totally surprised on that end that there would be some firings. I thought maybe they might go after Don Sweeney, but Sweeney and Cam Neely are buddies, so I guess I really wasn't too surprised. But that's that was the news of the day yesterday. And then, of course, now there's a report by Fluto Shinzawa of he used to be at the Boston Globe. I forget where he's at now. I think maybe ESPN. And Fluto Shinzawa had a report today that Patrice Bergeron's future is still kind of up in the air, and the decision to fire Bruce Cassidy has kind of made that decision a little bit murkier. Now, read into that what you will. If that means he's happy that Bruce is gone, and he's happy that they're looking for, but he's just a little undecided of what's going to happen because of who the new head coach will be, or vice versa. If he was mad that they fired him, and who knows, because there weren't any actual like quotes from Patricia, actual firsthand quotes, other than he was just kind of up in the air. So that was where he left it at. And then, of course, another rumor that we'll get into here later on is the David Pastrnak rumor that David Pastrnak. So the rumor is that if Don Sweeney remains the general manager, he might not sign an extension, and that he's not happy with how his friends were treated, probably David Krejci and Torrey Krug that were on the team. He wasn't pleased with how that went, but well, like I said, we'll get into that and where the future lies for the Boston Bruins. So big news from that front. And the Boston Red Sox out on the West Coast for a 10-game trip. So far, so good. 6-0 on the West. Well, 5-0 on the West Coast, because they're 6-0 after taking one game from the Reds, but they're 5-0 on the West Coast. Six games in a row overall. So they look to take game 3 of that set tonight in Anaheim, but it's the Los Angeles Angels, but not of Anaheim anymore, just the Los Angeles Angels, but in Anaheim. Oh boy, that's just weird, and it's always irritated me because Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, or Los Angeles Angels, or the LAAAA, or the California Angels. So just make up your damn mind. If you're in Anaheim, just be the Anaheim Angels. Whatever. Not going to get hung up on that anymore. It's just so the Red Sox took it in extra innings yesterday. So a team that was abysmal in extra innings to start the year has now taken their last 2 games in extras against the Seattle Mariners and now against the Angels. And Mike Trout in that game last night ended up getting hurt. So we'll see how that goes for the Red Sox. And speaking of injuries, the Red Sox are dealing with a few themselves. As Garrett Whitlock was seen limping, nothing officially has happened with him. We'll see how that goes. Now, one thing that did end up happening is that Kike Hernandez is now on the IL with a hip injury. So we'll see how that goes as they called up Jonathan Arauz to take his spot. I was a little surprised that they didn't call Jarren Duran back up, who in his second stint now, well, not second stint because he had one earlier that was just a game or so before this West Coast trip. But I mean, in his second stint, second season, if you will, with Boston, looked a lot better than he did in the first go around when he was striking out a ton. He's making a lot better contact. Everything looks better with him. So I was surprised that they didn't bring him up, especially to use that speed. And now that he's making better contact, you might have an actual pretty good leadoff or two-hole hitter. Well, no, you're probably not going to move Rafi out of two-hole. He's been so hot. But you have a guy that you can put at the top of the order if he's starting to make contact for the big boys, and Rafi and JD and Xander and Trevor Story. But so it was surprising that they went with Jonathan Arauz, but apparently from some reports, the Red Sox with some banged up guys in the infield, with Xander Bogaerts dealing with a few nagging injuries, and with them not really getting a lot of days off, that they'll probably bring up Jonathan Aru so they can give Xander and give a few of their other guys, give them a blow here and there, as we see Rafael Devers getting the night off tonight for the Red Sox, as it will be Nathan Eovaldi taking the mound for the Sox tonight. So they look to take 3 in a row. And some other news is that, in injury news for the Red Sox, as we stick with that theme, is Chris Sale got a setback with a stomach bug. So he was supposed to throw, not, I think it was either believe it was BP today, or throw. Yeah, it was BP, because it wasn't a live session. So it was just BP that he was supposed to throw, but that got pushed back because of a stomach bug. So this one should obviously nowhere near what happened way back in spring training with the rib injury, but it still is a little disconcerting that now you have to deal with that injury or another minor setback here, pushing it back even further. But the good news is that the Red Sox have been getting some good starting pitching, so we'll see how that all pans out. And of course, the Patriots are in mandatory minicamp phase, and most of the players, except for like N'Keal Harry, have pretty much all showed up to the camp. As not Michael Onwenu, but Isaiah Wynn. Wow, excuse me. Isaiah Wynn, their left tackle. Now the Patriots, during minicamp practices, have switched him over to right tackle. He is showing up. There was some speculation there that it might be a holdout going on into his last year. See how that all works out. But he is in minicamp, so there wasn't a terrible amount of news there. Newsworthy. There were some reports that possibly Matt Patricia is working his way to being the play caller, which makes me want to just throw up my dinner that I just had. And it just makes me physically ill thinking that the offense is going to be turned over to that. Oh, that poor excuse of a coach, at least as far as a head coach. Yes, and I know he was a solid defensive coordinator, blah, blah, blah. They won a Super Bowl in 2016 with him, in 14, but my God, he just was an awful, awful, awful head coach. You just can't wash that stink of Detroit off of him. Oh my God. And now this is where you're turning your franchise quarterback in Mac Jones, who is the future and is really good, is now going to be in the hands of Matt Patricia. Oh boy. Buckle up, everybody. Buckle up. That's all I got to say about that. So that is your out of the box segment. As that, we've touched on a lot of the news here, as there have been quite a bit. So Boston sports, the good, the bad, the ugly, never disappoints. There's always something to talk about. It's not one of those dead markets. There's always something. Gotta love Boston sports. Now, as you mentioned, the main entree this evening is the Boston Celtics, who look to take control, well, not take control, but take back the series, as they look to jump out in front of the Warriors and take a 2-1 lead in game after, and try to win game 3. Now I would say they did their job. They ended up getting a split on the road, which you always want to do in a 7-game series, especially if you don't have home court, which the Celtics didn't. So now, with the Boston Celtics, they quote unquote took home court advantage back now, as I like I said, they did their job, but game 2 was disappointing. Now, just kind of briefly looking at game 1, as we haven't been on the air since then, obviously your little refresher is that the Celtics were down as much by 13 or 14 points at the end of the third quarter. And again, it was another nasty theme that showed up in game 2, and it's been going on all postseason long. And that is the third quarter just absolute not collapses and lack of effort, lack of hustle, whatever you want to term it. It's just been awful in the third quarter. Now, the Celtics in game 1 were able to mount probably the best comeback I've ever seen in a basketball game, at least in a long, long time, at least since I've been alive and been able to watch sports myself. They ended up outscoring the Warriors 40-16 in that run, and it was just an absolute bloodbath. Every time the Celtics put up a three, it just seemed like they sank it. They got key contributions from Al Horford, who was the leading scorer for the Celtics, scored 26 on the night. You had Derek White pop a bunch of key threes in key situations. The Celtics were just absolutely on fire in the fourth quarter, came back, won the game. It was 120-108. It was just an absolute laugher that went in the Celtics' direction, which it did not seem like that was going to be the case after the third quarter. It seemed like it was going to have to be, all right, let's regroup for game 2 and let's try to get this one, as Steph Curry was absolutely on fire in the first quarter, but the Celtics, to their credit, held them to only 13 in the second half. So it was something from the Celtics in game 1, and maybe one of the things that they have struggled to deal with all season, all postseason, has been just maybe feeling themselves, kind of smelling their own scent, if you will, after a big win, where they come out, maybe have a little bit going there in the first quarter or find it in the second, but just the second halves of games after victories, it just seems that they lose a little focus or something happens there, because just game 2 was just so disappointing. So disappointing as far as how the second half went, because they had a chance to have a double-digit lead going into the half. But the Warriors, to their credit, obviously they are 3-time champions. They've been to 6 of the last 8 NBA finals over this time span. So it obviously, we're talking about a veteran championship squad across the way in San Francisco, in the Golden State. But again, the Celtics, they just appear to be the better team altogether, just because if Klay Thompson was healthy, back to 100%, back to being the second Splash brother, I mean, they would be right there and even, but you can just tell that Klay's not 100% back. He's there. He's performing. He's hit some clutch shots over this playoff run, but just watching him over this 2-game stretch with the Celtics, it's just not the same Klay Thompson that you've seen over their dynastic run. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from them. The Golden State, the Warriors, are the team of this last decade. They're one of the modern day dynasties, but this isn't the same Warriors team. And this Celtics squad, they're younger, they have more athleticism. So when the Celtics don't shoot themselves in the foot, they are the better team. But something just happens after a big win like it did in game 1, where I don't know what happens. They just go out there lackadaisical. They turn the ball over. And I know the big talk was about Draymond Green. And don't get me wrong, I hate having to play Draymond Green. And Draymond Green just drives me up an effing wall. It's just ridiculous. He gets away with so much shit out on the court that it's not even funny. And he blatantly, after the game, admits it himself that he gets preferential treatment. He gets special treatment. Now, you don't even hear guys like LeBron or Michael Jordan or Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard or any of the top players, any of the top players. You don't even hear his teammates and Steph Curry out there saying that they get preferential treatment. So he blatantly admits it to you that he gets refereed differently, and yet he should have been tossed out of the game because he should have got that second technical foul. But where I have to push back on all of this, even though he irritates me, and even though he should have technically been tossed from the game, he should have got that second technical. If you're a Celtics fan, you can't sit there and blame that loss on Draymond Green. They only went down and they only were down by 2 at the half. They were only down by 2. It's not like Draymond Green was scoring 15. He had 15 points, or it's not to the point where he was so far into their heads where they were getting out of it right at that point, and they were down, and they looked up and they were down by 15 or down by 20, at least at that point in the game. So you can't sit there, at least from my standpoint, you can't sit there and blame this loss on Draymond. You can't. Plain and simple, the reason why they lost game 2 was turnovers. And my God, we've seen this movie so many effing times over this playoff run. We see, especially from Jaylen Brown. God, I love Jaylen Brown. He has some of the most athletic, freakish plays on this Celtics team. Has monster dunks. Can shoot from behind the arc. And is great. He's the perfect complement to Jason Tatum. But my God, hold on to the goddamn ball. There'll be just times where he drives into traffic, 2-3 guys, does the steps in, steps out, trying to bowl through like a bull in a china shop, where there are times where obviously you want to see him drive, get to the basket, use that strength. Don't get me wrong, I want him to do that, but there are times when he's just not smart about it. He drives into too much traffic and the ball gets poked out, or he's careless with his dribble, which that on its own is its own infuriating thing, is just that he doesn't have a great handle. And sometimes in a playoff game, doesn't feel like it's passable. It just feels like he should be more of a catch and shoot and use the athleticism to kind of drive through the lane. But again, there would be times where he just gets it poked away with a careless handle. And my God, game 2, it just seemed like there was a stretch there through the second and third quarter where he just kept turning it over every time he touched it. At least that's what it seemed like. And I just can't sit there and keep watching this game in and game out. When are they going to learn? When? That's the question that I've been asking myself all postseason. And at this point, they're not going to. They've made it to the NBA Finals, and they haven't learned a damn thing. Not a goddamn thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're in the NBA Finals. They're talented, and they've gotten here on their defense and gotten there with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown being the backbone offensively. But it's just maddening just to know that if you had held on to the ball, you might have been only down by 5 points going in that fourth quarter. You might have had a shot to pull it out, or who knows, you might have had a lead. They're just their turnover margin is just absolutely ridiculous. And it's infuriating. But like I said, at the same time, they are where they are in the finals, and they've been able to overcome it for the most part. But it would just be so much easier if they were limiting them. I know what's going to happen. You're not going to go. I mean, you're not going to go through a complete NBA game and not turn the ball over somehow. And then not even the ones where it goes directly on a fast break to the Warriors, which that's happened a lot last game. But there was also a couple times where the Celtics, not just Jaylen Brown, but other Celtics players, I want to say, was this Tatum to Smart or Smart to go into Tatum? But it was on a pretty long pass that one of the two in the situation fired a bullet down the court, and I believe it was Tatum that was the intended target. Ended up not having any shot at it, and it went completely out of bounds. So there's just been careless times where they turned it over, and that's just that to me. That was the numero uno reason why, and it was not. It's not the secondary reason of why they lost isn't even close. So yes, does Draymond Green irritate me? Am I pissed off about what's happened? Do I want to see 80s style basketball with there being a brawl out there on the court, or just kind of seeing a little physicality out there and him get smacked around a little bit, a la 80s basketball? And honestly, if you haven't heard some of the stuff where former Celtics players like Cedric Maxwell and Robert Parrish have kind of come out and said that they would have done the same thing that they would have done in the 80s as far as kind of knock them around and get physical with them, you need to go find those clips because they are great. They're just great as far as the comments that they've had on Draymond Green. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. If Draymond was on my team, I'd probably love him. It's the Brad Marchand effect, basically. And obviously, Brad Marchand, the completely better player in his sport as to what Draymond Green is, but I'm sure if he was on the Celtics and he was that defensive wizard, and being that irritant out on the court for us, I'm sure I would love him. But when the shoe's on the other foot, I don't. He irritates me, pisses me off. I just don't want to see him out. I just want to see him get pushed around and bullied out there on the court. I want to see maybe you send out Daniel Tice or Robert Williams if his knee's acting up and he knows that he's probably going to not play much in the game. Maybe he just goes out there and gets a little bit physical with him and gets in an altercation with him. Who knows? Or you send out one of your slubs that are on the bench that's only gets garbage time minutes. But seriously though, it would be if he kind of got 80, if they went back to 80s basketball and kind of pushed him around and played that way, I would not be opposed to it as far as seeing Draymond Green get his ass kicked a little bit out there. But it's not going to happen because it's not that kind of NBA anymore. But nonetheless, you can't put the blame on Draymond. You can't. You just can't. It's not. There's way too many actual basketball things out there that were happening, and like I said, mainly turnovers that cost the Celtics. And then the only thing that kind of scares me about tonight is that the Celtics have been so great when they've had to play with that backs against their wall mentality. And to be honest, they're better. They've been better on the road than they have been at home. They've had like one loss or like not one, were they like 8-3, 7-2 or something like that on the road in the playoffs. So and then at home that's where they've struggled. Like they've given up games to Miami and Milwaukee on their home court. But again, they've won the series because they've been road warriors. But this is a whole other animal with the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, I don't know if I want to play that game of okay, we have to we can afford to lose one here, then go back out to Golden State, because before the Celtics beat Golden State on the road in San Francisco, they were undefeated for this year in the playoffs at home. They're tough. They're a tough nut to crack on the road, or at home, I should say, for Golden State. So this is where you have to. This is what kind of worries me. Hopefully, you don't get into that lazy, not lazy, but kind of that. All right, relaxed mode of we're back at home. We got this. We're on our home court and kind of give up an egg like they have to some other in some other past series this year. So this is where I'm hoping that they take advantage of being at home and realizing that this is a whole other animal when it comes to Golden State. They're so much better at home, and we can't just rely on being road warriors that we're gonna win multiple games because you it just worries me from that standpoint as far as is when once you get later into the series versus a Golden State team that has won 3 titles, that's been there 6 times over the span. They know how to close out a series. So if you get deeper into this, into game what set, yeah, if you get it to a game 7 on the road, obviously I'd still be confident that Celtics should pull out, but I mean not as confident as I would be if they had a chance like in game 6 at home per se. So this is just where that you have to take you have to do your work at home, and you have to take care of business here and just make sure that uh, you make sure that you get your victories at home because you don't want to have to rely on you don't want to have to fall back on these old habits which have gotten you through, but I just don't know if this is the right team to do it with in Golden State. And of course, we're getting closer to tip off as well. So so far, no other new news that's kind of come across as far as Golden State, but it's been I just hope that we see more consistency coming out of Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. You kind of see the turnovers because that's been the other thing has just been the consistency all year long as well, all playoff run as well. It's just been one game you get a great game, one game you kind of get a clunker. So can we get everything rolled into let's get this game tonight, and then can we get another win on Friday? Can we kind of get a little momentum? Can we put together back to back good games? Now, I know you're asking a lot against Golden State, but that's just where you need to see Jason Tatum just take it to that next level as far as be consistent. I know that was something I harped on to begin the series, and he had a solid game 1. He ended up having, well, I should say I say solid because he had all the assists. His offensive game was not great. I mean, it was bad because he went 3 for 17, but was able to distribute it. So he did come out and he did contribute in other ways. He was that playmaker, which I talked about. But again, there still was that full game missing from him. So it was probably like a C- performance from Jason Tatum in game 1. And it just seemed as though game 2, he got his points, but the Celtics ended up getting blown out in game 2 that he just was forgettable as far as what everybody else did in the first half of the game. So this is where you just have to see more consistency from the Celtics as we get closer to the start of game number 3. Now, as I mentioned, we're kind of going to cram some stuff in here is because we're going to try to get you out of here before the game starts. But with the Boston Bruins, the other counterpart of the Garden, they ended up firing Bruce Cassidy. And I was mildly surprised. I wasn't surprised somebody got let go, just the way that Cam Neely's comments went. It wasn't a ringing endorsement for Bruce Cassidy. So I wasn't surprised that he got let go. But I'm not to say I'm happy with it. I would rather have Bruce be here and Don Sweeney be gone, just because to me, Don Sweeney has underperformed as far as drafting and developing players. Obviously, we know the famous 2015 draft where they whiffed on taking Matt Barzal, who's now with the Islanders, who's turned himself into a pretty good center. They took Jacob Zavoral, Zach Sednishin, and Jake DeBrusk. The only one that's had any decent success has been DeBrusk, but it's pale. But what Matt Barzal has done pales in comparison to what excuse me, sorry, to what Jacob DeBrusk has done. It's just been night and day with those, of course, with that draft. But again, then just the only hit that he's had some hits. I mean, we know Charlie McAvoy. You got a franchise defenseman. You got Jeremy Swayman, hopefully your goaltender for the future, and then you have David Pastrnak, one of the best goal scorers in the league. So you hit on those picks. No problem there. But it's just been way too many misses. Yeah, and I know he's done some good things as far as bringing in good pieces from the trade market. He hasn't been, trust me, he hasn't been perfect. I'd say he's probably been in that 65 to like 70% hit range for him. Because, I mean, I like the move that he got Hampus Lindholm this year. You got a young defenseman to pair with Charlie McAvoy for a long time. And, of course, we remember the Rick Nash trade. Now, I know they didn't end up winning a cup, but you got a veteran presence there, and I didn't mind that trade. Obviously, there have been some misses along the way. You had the Andre Kasha trade and Nick Ritchie. That trade was not great. I mean, Nick Ritchie had a handful of moments, but there were moments where you were left scratching his head where he made dumb plays in the playoff run, especially last year. And it was so disappointing. So trust me, he hasn't been perfect as far as with Sweeney. So he's, like I said, he's had his hits and misses. It's just been the failure to get high end talent into this system has just been the real kick in the nuts as far as for the Bruins. Because let's say you got Matt Barzal in 2015, if you decided to take him, look, you'd have your second line center, your second or third line center right there. You'd have that guy to play, and you'd have your talented center. And if you were able to bring in some other talent that could be top six players, well, obviously with Marchand and Bergeron getting up there, getting longer in the tooth, especially Bergeron, then that would subjugate a lot right there. That would do a lot for the Celtics. I'm sorry, we talked a lot about the Celtics. That would do a lot for the Bruins there if you're able to bring in some talent through your own system and not have to go out and trade for it all the time. So the point being is I'd rather see Cassidy, because I know there were reports that maybe some of the lower on the rung players weren't happy with their playing time and how things went. And obviously we can kind of all presume that Jacob DeBrusk was one of those players as well that was not happy with Bruce Cassidy. But Bruce Cassidy is a coach that since he came in 2017 has made the playoffs every year. He took that 2019 team all the way to the Stanley Cup final. And that was a run where they should have beat the Blues. They should have beat the Blues. Ugh. That one always kills me. That Stanley Cup run always kills me. They should have beat the Blues. But again, he's been in the playoffs every year. So it'll be interesting to see who they replace him with. Now, there've been obviously some names that have kind of got thrown out there, but no real substantial rumors that are kind of really holding up at the moment. Obviously, it's very early in the process, so we'll see how that goes. And honestly, it all depends on what direction this Bruins team goes in, is probably what kind of coach you're going to bring in. If you're going to go for it, if you get Bergeron back and you're able to bring Pastrnak, if you're not back because he's already signed, but as far as if you're kind of able to decide what if he wants to still stick around because of the rumors with him and Don Sweeney, which we'll get to in a second. So it's just a matter of, are you going to go for it? And if you bring the pieces back, what else are you going to do? Because it's not going to be enough with just bringing back Bergeron. You're going to have to do some more. And even if you brought in Krejci, that still wouldn't be, you'd still need to bring in some more pieces, get more depth for this team. But that's the other question, is just how is this going to go? Bergeron, as we mentioned, is still kind of up in the air what he's going to do. And reportedly, the whole coaching situation is kind of throwing him through a loop, which I kind of don't blame him, because what's going to happen with this franchise? And Don Sweeney famously said they're kind of planning their offseason around Bergeron. But in Bergeron's state, the other thing I left out when I talked about Bergeron's statement earlier is that he might not make his decision until November or December, which obviously the season's already underway, so that puts them in a rock and a hard place. So they're really in a tough spot. And then with the David Pastrnak decision about should I do I want to be back, because the way that Don Sweeney's treated some of my teammates, he's not happy with that and might not be willing to sign an extension here, according to a source. But again, that did not come directly out of the mouth of Pastrnak, so take it for what it's worth. But again, he is your best player on this team in Pastrnak. I mean, obviously he's got work to do on the defensive side, but he's a top 10, if not top 5 goal scorer, pure goal scorer. I would say top 5 pure goal scorer in the league. That's how good he is. And he's only 25, so you can't let him just walk out the door. Now, obviously, there's going to have to be discussions if you're going to have to pull the trigger on trading him, if maybe Bergeron says, no, I'm not coming back. But then again, do you have confidence that they're going to get anything for him? Because the last few times that they traded big-time prospects, big-time players off their team, or big-time young players, Joe Thornton didn't get much back for him. Traded Tyler Seguin, didn't get anything for him. You traded Dougie Hamilton, really didn't get anything for him. So it's just been, do you trust them to get anything back for David Pastrnak? So I don't. So this is where you kind of hope that David Pastrnak and maybe Cam Neely or ownership, they can all come to a better agreement and just say, all right, you're the face of this franchise. We're going to make you happy. And here, we'll try to work some things out here for you. But it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out, because it's not trending in the right direction. This is kind of trending in more of a rebuild. Almost kind of threw up a little bit trying to think about that, just because that's not what I want to see. I'd rather obviously have them be in the playoff mix, but they might have to go down that road. They might have to pull the trigger on that rebuild, and it's not shaping up in a good direction of how this is all starting. Now, we'll quickly kind of take a look here at the Red Sox. As you mentioned, they won 6 in a row, won 5 in a row on the West Coast, swept the A's. They've taken the first 2 of this 4-game set with the Angels, and then they have a 3-game set against the Mariners. So this West Coast trip has been very successful so far. Very, very successful. They already have 5 wins. Now, to me, the impressive part of all of this with the Red Sox has been the starting pitching over this stretch, because they've gotten a great performance as far as in Nick Pivetta, who's had an absolute dominant turnaround. He's been great over these last 5-6 games. So basically ever since April, since the end of April, when he had that horrid April, he's had a 180 as far as how things have gone for Nick Pivetta. He's had a complete game over this stretch. He's absolutely come out and been one of your most dependable big spot starters. And when I say that, he's just a guy that you can rely on when you need that big moment. And to this point, he's lowered his ERA to 3.5. That's how good it's been over these last couple games. And so here's his last 3 starts. So he's 3-0. He pitched 7 against Oakland, pitched 6 against Baltimore, and then pitched 6 against Chicago, the White Sox. He's given up 4 runs over those 3 games, 1 against Baltimore, 3 against Chicago. He's had 7 walks. and his struck out 7 against Oakland, struck out 5 against Baltimore, struck out 5 against Chicago. But the big point right there, and just looking at this over his last 7 games, his ERA is 1.79. 1.79. That's an amazing turnaround. Just amazing. So he's right. And this year, as much as I love Nathan Eovaldi, who's a big game pitcher and gives it his all every game, Nick Pivetta, since that horrid April, has looked as much of the ace of the staff as Eovaldi has. And Eovaldi and obviously Eovaldi, he's 3-2. His ERA is 3.4. And his last 7, his ERA is 3.46. So he's been right around where he's been all season. For this year, the only thing with Eovaldi has been giving up the home runs, but the main thing there has just been what Nick Pivetta has been able to do out on the mound in his turnaround, and just absolutely been a bulldog out there. There's been a guy that you just give him the ball every 5th day, and you know that you're going to have a chance to win it. That's how it's been over this last what 5 or 6 games that he's pitched. And that's a boon to the staff, because obviously you don't have Chris Sale, you don't have James Paxton. And then, of course, his other running mate in the rotation, because we can't look past this, has been Michael Wacha. And Michael Wacha, who I'll admittedly shrugged my shoulders. Obviously, I know who he is, but my point being is that when they signed Michael Wacha, I'm like, okay, he's not the 2013 through 2015 Michael Wacha, who was an absolute flamethrower and one of the top pitching prospects and one of the top young arms that came up through the system with St. Louis, and then absolutely fell off a cliff after those years. And he just has not been the same. He's career 67-49, so he gets his wins, but his career ERA of 4.04, so not bad. Not horrible or bad, but not great either. So he turned into an average pitcher after having 3 really good seasons early on in his career, because in 2013 he was 4-1, a 2.7 ERA in 15 games. In 2014 was 5-6 with a 3.2 in 19 games. And then his best season, 2015, was 17-7 with a 3.3 ERA. So obviously you get that type of Michael Wacha, you're in great shape. But since then, he's been up and down. He's pretty much since then, his lowest was 2018 in 15 games with the Cardinals, was 8-2 with a 3.2 ERA, but it's really been kind of up and down. Is at a 5.9, 4.1, 4.76, a 6.62, and a 5.05 ERA. So it's just been, as you can see, it just hasn't been that great of a stretch here for Nick Pivetta. For Michael Wacha. So it's been interesting to say the least for Michael Wacha. But he came out, pitched a gem the other night, pitched a complete game, 1-run win. They absolutely stole that from the Angels. So it's been amazing to see Michael Wacha have a great comeback here, and I will eat my words on Michael Wacha. I'm happy that what they were able to get out of him, and even if maybe this is what he is until the first half, and if he starts to tail off, and if you get Chris Sale coming back, and you get James Paxton, then great. But I mean, so far it's kind of been a revelation with Michael Wacha. So they've gotten great starting pitching, and then they've had some timely bullpen outings as well. So things are, and obviously now they are 2 games above 500. They're 29-27. They're in the last wild card spot. So they're in great shape. They honestly are. They're in a great position now to start to run with this and start to get in a good position to take off. And because, of course, they still have 2 more against the Angels, who fired Joe Madden. They've lost 14 in a row. And now you go out to Seattle, who's floundering now too. So you're in a good position to kind of build those wins before you get back in the American League East and back to facing the Jays and the Rays and the Yankees. So it'll be a good time to fatten up and at least kind of get a little bit of a cushion in the wild card. So before you face those other American League East teams, but I like the direction that they're going. They don't get me wrong. They still need major help in the bullpen. They need those major arms. And of course, you're still going to need to probably get some bench players as well. Some everyday major league bench players in there as well. Maybe another outfield bat as well. But I do like the direction that this Red Sox team is going in. All right, that will do it for us tonight, folks, as we wrap up our coverage and we get ready for a big night here in Boston sports, with the Red Sox being the kind of appetizer as they have a West Coast game. But of course, game 3 tonight in Boston with the Warriors and Celtics. I'll be glued to that, as I'm sure a lot of you will. And always remember that every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, we stream this show. And if you can't catch it, remember, you can always subscribe to the show on Spotify or SoundCloud. Just search for New England Sports Weekly. Or you can, watch the live stream on YouTube and search for New England Sports Weekly. And of course, if you want to always send me a live chat, don't be a bot and spam me like this one is. This is just annoying. Man. But you can always send me a live chat in the chat room here, or you can send me a question on Twitter at my Twitter or Instagram at my personal account at Sean_Met28. It's the same for both. Or you can follow the show account at NE Sports Weekly. And you get all your up-to-date news for the show and for anything going around Boston sports. All right, until then, folks, we'll be back next week with obviously more NBA Finals talk, and of course, anything that happens with the Bruins drama going on, we'll fill you in, and of course, we'll break down more Red Sox as they are on a hot streak and see if they can keep it going and see how far they can climb up into the wild card, or see what happens for your Red Sox. But until then, you have a good one, folks.